crystalline walls of the Grand Tribunal stretched upward into darkness, so vast that the ceiling disappeared beyond sight. Victoria Blake stood alone in the center of the massive chamber, closed within a shimmering energy field that hummed with enough power to contain a dying star. Around her, arranged in ascending circles like an ancient amphitheater, sat representatives from 12,000 species. Some had eyes. Some had sensors. Some existed as clouds of gas or patterns of light. All of them watched her. Victoria wore simple gray clothing, unmarked and plain. Her hands hung relaxed at her sides. She did not look afraid. The murmuring of 1,000 languages filled the air like distant thunder. Translators worked frantically to convert the chaos into meaning. Holographic displays flickered to life around the chamber, showing images that made several delegates turn away. Burning cities. Shattered fleets drifting through space. Entire worlds going dark. Their populations simply vanishing overnight. A being of pure energy descended from the highest tier. The High Arbiter of the Luminar Collective had no physical form, only a consciousness that burned like a captured sun. When it spoke, every translator in the chamber rendered its words simultaneously. The human Victoria Blake stands accused of 17,000 counts of systematic annihilation, species genocide, the destruction of sovereign worlds, the dissolution of ancient empires. The High Arbiter's light pulsed brighter. How does humanity answer these charges? Victoria smiled. It was not a nervous smile or a defensive one. It was the smile of someone who knew something the entire galaxy did not. The silence stretched. Alien delegates shifted in their seats. Some whispered to their neighbors. Others activated private communication channels. A few reached for weapons they had been assured would not be necessary. Victoria finally spoke, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space without technological amplification. I answer with a question. High Arbiter, why did you think we would forgive? The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in languages that sounded like wind through crystal, like grinding stone, like music played backward. The High Arbiter demanded order, its light flashing in sharp bursts that hurt to witness. Forgive. A Corel representative stood, its golden scales catching the light. Your species has murdered billions. You have erased the Morith from existence. You turned the Crete homeworld into a tomb. You dissolved the Varnix Empire as though it were nothing. And you dare speak of forgiveness? Victoria's smile did not waver. Every species in this chamber participated in the same crime 200 years ago. You saw Earth. You saw us reaching for the stars. And every single one of you made the same choice. The High Arbiter's light dimmed slightly. Explain yourself, human. The holographic displays changed. New images appeared, pulled from archives that several species had believed were destroyed. Earth as it had been 2 centuries ago. Blue and green and beautiful. Ships descending through the atmosphere, welcomed by cheering crowds. First contact, Victoria said quietly. We were so excited. We thought we had finally found our place among the stars. The images showed humans greeting aliens with open arms. Ambassadors signing treaties. Technology being shared. Then the tone shifted. Harvesting machines descending. Humans running. Cities burning not from weapons, but from the systematic dismantling of infrastructure. Thomas Reed led our first delegation, Victoria continued. He believed your promises. He believed the Corel when they spoke of partnership and mutual prosperity. He did not understand until it was too late that humanity had only one resource you valued. A Voskan delegate, its crystalline body refracting rainbow light, spoke up. Your species possessed unmatched adaptability. You could survive environments that killed other races. You learned faster than any servitor species we had encountered. You should have been honored to serve. Honored, Victoria repeated. The word hung in the air like poison. You rounded us up like animals. You bred us in facilities designed for livestock. You separated children from parents and sold them to the highest bidder. You worked us until we died and then processed our bodies into raw materials. Her voice remained calm, almost conversational, and you believed we would simply accept this forever. The displays showed more. mining colonies where humans broke rocks under alien suns, research facilities where human subjects screamed during experiments, breeding centers where newborns were tagged and cataloged like products. Earth's governments resisted, Victoria said. They lasted 6 hours against your combined fleets. Our military forces, advanced by our standards, were toys compared to galactic technology. You designated our entire planet as a breeding colony. You distributed my people across 12,000 species as property. A delegate from the Quilmer Consortium stood. This is ancient history. The practices you describe were outlawed 50 years ago. The Galactic Council issued proclamations ensuring ethical treatment of all sentient species. Victoria laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. 50 years ago. After we had already begun taking our freedom back, you outlawed slavery when you realized your slaves had learned to fight? The High Arbiter's light pulsed with what might have been anger. You stand accused of genocide, human. Not your ancestors. You, personally. The charges state that you coordinated the attacks on the Crete Dominion. That you personally designed the virus that sterilized the Varnix leadership. That you commanded the forces that made the Morith vanish. The Morith, Victoria said. She gestured, and the containment field flickered. Just for an instant. But every species in the chamber saw it. Saw a human casually interfere with technology that harnessed the power of stars. Several delegates activated emergency shields. Others began moving toward exits. The High Arbiter's light flared brightly. Re-establishing the containment field at triple strength, Victoria seemed unconcerned. The charges claim we destroyed the Morith. That is inaccurate. We did not destroy them. We evolved them. Would you like to meet them? The massive doors at the far end of the chamber opened. What entered bore no resemblance to the spider-like Morith that had once enslaved humans in their underground colonies. These beings moved with fluid grace, their forms shifting between states of matter. They were biological and technological, individual and collective, familiar and utterly alien. They spoke in perfect unison, their voices a harmony of human and Morith. We volunteered. Humanity showed us what we could become when we stopped trying to dominate and started trying to grow. A wave of fear rippled through the chamber. Delegates who had been demanding Victoria's execution suddenly looked uncertain. The High Arbiter's light flickered erratically.
What have you done?
The Arbiter whispered. Victoria's expression hardened. We survived. We learned. We became what we needed to be. And now, High Arbiter, we are going to discuss reparations. Reparations. The Corral delegates' scales rattled in agitation. You are the ones on trial. You are the ones who must answer for your crimes. No. Victoria's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You put me in this containment field because you are afraid. You brought 12,000 species together because you cannot face us alone. You accuse us of genocide while ignoring the 200 years you spent treating us as objects. I am not here to beg for mercy. I am here to offer you terms. The High Arbiter's light pulsed rapidly. You are in no position to dictate terms. Victoria smiled again. Then try to execute your sentence. Activate the containment field's purge function. Attempt to eliminate me. I will wait. The chamber fell silent. The High Arbiter did not move. Could not move. Because everyone in that vast space understood the truth that Victoria had just made explicit. If the galaxy's most powerful containment technology could not hold one human, what could it do against all of humanity? Shall we begin negotiations? Victoria asked. Or would you prefer to continue this trial and discover exactly how much we learned during our centuries in chains? Marcus Webb had never seen Earth. His grandmother told stories about blue skies and oceans, but Marcus had only ever known the red dust of Tertes 9 and the crushing heat of 3 suns, beating down on the mining colony. He was 23 years old and had spent every day of his life breaking rocks. The overseers were Voskin, beings made of living crystal that communicated through pulses of colored light. They did not speak to humans except to give orders. Humans were tools, no different from the drilling equipment or the ore processors. When a tool broke, you recycled it and requisitioned a new one. Marcus swung his hammer against the rock face, feeling the impact shudder through his arms. Beside him, Kira Nash worked in silence. She was older than Marcus, maybe 30, with scars on her hands from years of labor. They did not speak. Speaking wasted energy. And energy was the difference between surviving another day and collapsing in the tunnels. But when the midday break came, and the overseers retreated to their climate-controlled shelters, Kira leaned close to Marcus and whispered 2 words that changed everything. "You ready?" Marcus had been part of the archive for 3 months. Kira had recruited him carefully, watching him for weeks before making contact. The archive was not a place or an organization. It was a network of human slaves spread across the galaxy, sharing knowledge through methods their masters never monitored. Genetic markers were embedded in children at birth. Invisible. La2 alien scanners, but readable by humans who knew what to look for. Mathematical patterns were encoded in work quotas. Manufacturing errors spelled out messages. Even the distribution of slaves across different facilities carried information. 12,000 species had enslaved humanity. They had put humans everywhere. On warships as maintenance crews because humans could work in environments that would kill most species. In research facilities as test subjects because human biology adapted to almost anything. In government archives as data processors because humans learned languages faster than translation software. In medical centers because humans could survive procedures that were lethal to other races. The aliens thought they were using humanity. They did not realize humanity was learning from them. Every language, every technology, every secret. For 200 years, humans had been absorbing it all. Dr. Helena Cross sent a message, Kira whispered. The breakthrough worked. Marcus felt his heart race. Helena Cross was a legend in the archive, a human physician who had been forced to work in a Drenth medical facility. The Drenths were masters of genetic manipulation, and they had spent decades experimenting on human subjects to make them more efficient workers. They had succeeded beyond their understanding. Helena had been given access to their gene editing equipment to help refine the modifications. Instead, she'd used it to enhance human cognitive processing, carefully, incrementally, in ways the Drenth would never detect. The modifications spread through breeding populations. Parents passed enhanced neural structures to their children. Each generation became slightly more capable, slightly faster at learning, slightly better at retaining information. The Drenth never noticed their slaves were getting smarter. They only saw that productivity was increasing. What kind of breakthrough? Marcus asked. Kira glanced toward the overseer's shelter, making sure they were still alone. Distributed consciousness. She figured out how to let us share thoughts. Marcus stared at her. That's impossible. So it was surviving 200 years of slavery, Kira said. But here we are. That night, in the deep tunnels where monitoring equipment did not reach, Kira introduced Marcus to the others. 50 humans gathered in a cavern that should have been empty. They sat in a circle, and one by one, they touched hands. Marcus felt it immediately. A presence in his mind that was not his own. No, dozens of presences. Hundreds. He could feel Kira's exhaustion from the day's work. He could sense the fear of a woman who had lost her daughter to the recycling facility last month. He could touch the anger of a man who had watched his brother beaten to death for working too slowly. And beneath it all, connecting them like invisible threads, was something vast. The archive itself. Billions of humans across the galaxy, all linked through Helena's modifications. We are not alone anymore, Kira said aloud, but Marcus heard her voice in his mind as well. We are never alone. An older man named Isaac Oren stepped forward. He had the bearing of a leader, though leaders were not permitted among slaves. In 6 months, we take the transport ship in orbit. We have people placed in every system. Navigation, security, life support. When we move together. And go where? Someone asked. Earth is a breeding colony. They will just recapture us. Isaac's smile was grim. Earth is not what it was. The archive has been working there too. We have people in the administrative centers, in the genetic facilities, In the ships that transport new slaves off-world? He paused. In 6 months, we are not just escaping. We are going home to free it. The plan was beautiful in its complexity. Coordinated escapes across 1,000 worlds. Ships stolen or sabotaged. Communication networks disrupted. All timed to create maximum chaos while minimizing loss of human life. But plans made by slaves were always fragile. 3 weeks before the scheduled uprising, the Voskan overseers discovered something. A human worker had made an error, a code sequence that should have been invisible. The overseers did not understand what they had found, but they knew it was wrong. They began investigating, checking records, analyzing patterns. Within days, it identified 50 humans suspected of conspiracy. Marcus was one of them. The Voskan did not ask questions. They simply issued the order. All 50 suspects were to be recycled. Immediately, Marcus stood in line with the others, walking toward the facility where they would be executed and their bodies broken down into usable materials. Kira walked beside him, her face calm despite the fear Marcus could feel radiating from her through their connection. "Do not be afraid," she whispered. Helena's modifications were not just to make us smarter. The facility doors opened. The humans were pushed inside by Voskan guards, whose crystalline bodies refracted the harsh light into rainbow patterns. The recycling machines hummed to life, their blades and chemical baths ready to reduce human bodies to component parts. Then everything stopped. The machines froze mid-cycle. The lights flickered and died. The Voskan guards stood motionless, their internal light pulses stuttering in confusion. Marcus felt something new in his mind. Not just the presence of the other humans in the room. Not just the archive. Something deeper. A connection to the machines themselves. To the facility's computer systems. To the power grid that fed the entire colony. Kira's voice filled his thoughts. Helena's breakthrough was not just distributed consciousness. She gave us the ability to interface directly with technology. Any technology. Around the room, the other humans were discovering the same thing. One woman touched a control panel, and the door locks disengaged. A man looked at a security camera, and its feed went dark. Another simply thought about the overhead lights, and they ignited in response. The Voskan guards tried to activate their weapons. The weapons did not respond. Marcus reached out with his mind and felt the vastness of the colony's infrastructure, the mining equipment, the transport systems, the communication arrays, all of it built and maintained by human hands for 2 centuries. All of it suddenly responsive to human thoughts. Isaac Oren stood in the center of the recycling facility, surrounded by machines that no longer threatened them. He spoke, and his words carried through the archive to every human on Tertius 9. Phase 2 begins now. We are not escaping. We are taking control. Within an hour, the entire mining colony belonged to humanity. The Voskan overseers were locked in their own shelters, cut off from their technology. Helpless as their former slaves claimed everything they had once owned and across the galaxy. On 1,000 other worlds, humans were making the same discovery. They were not just workers or experimental subjects or breeding stock. They were the foundation of galactic civilization. The hands that built everything. The minds that maintained everything, and now they could control everything. Marcus stood outside under the 3 suns of Tertius 9, feeling the connection to billions of other humans stretching across space. For the first time in his life, he understood what freedom meant. It was not the absence of chains. It was the presence of power. The Carol Dominion controlled 300 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet. Their military network was the most advanced in the galaxy. Built over thousands of years and protected by security systems that had never been breached, Jack Reeves wiped his hands on his maintenance uniform and walked away from the central navigation computer. He was one of 10,000 human technicians scattered across the Carol fleet, considered too valuable to waste in the mines, but too primitive to pose any threat. The Corral did not know that. Jack had just planted code in their military network that would remain dormant for decades. They did not know that 10,000 other humans had done the same thing that day. Each one adding a small piece to a puzzle the Carol would never see coming. The code was beautiful in its simplicity. It did nothing except wait and listen. When the time came, when the signal was sent through the archive, every piece would activate simultaneously. The Corel military would belong to humanity in the space of a heartbeat, but that time was not yet. Jack returned to his quarters, a small room he shared with 3 other maintenance workers. He closed his eyes and reached out through the connection Helena Cross had given them. Billions of minds touched his own. He could feel humans on frozen ice worlds and scorching desert planets. He could sense their pain and their hope and their growing strength, and he could feel the plan taking shape. Across the galaxy, humans were waking up to what they had become. The modifications that Helena had introduced were spreading faster now, no longer limited to breeding populations. Humans who had never been to a Drenth medical facility were developing the same abilities. The distributed consciousness was becoming something more than a communication network. It was becoming a single organism spread across a trillion. BODIES, Dr. Helena Cross herself stood in the medical facility on Drenth Prime, surrounded by equipment that had been used to torture her people for generations. She was old now, her hair white and her hands marked with scars. But her mind was sharper than ever, enhanced by the same modifications she had given to others. A young Drenth physician named Vrel watched her work with obvious confusion. "I do not understand, human. This neural mapping shows structures that should not exist in your species. Your brain is forming connections that resemble Morith hive patterns, Carol's spatial processing nodes, even Voskin quantum cognate. Ion matrices." Elena smiled. "Human neural plasticity is remarkable, is it not?" "This is beyond plasticity," Vrel insisted. "This is impossible. You are developing cognitive structures that took other species millions of years to evolve." "Not developing," Helena corrected. "Choosing, we can think like a Carol, a Voskin, or a Morith, because we have worked with them for 2 centuries. We learned their languages, their technology, their ways of processing information. Our brains adapted." She did not tell Vrel that she had accelerated the process, that every human child born in the last 50 years carried genetic modifications that made them compatible with any alien technology, that humanity was becoming a species that could interface with anything, operate anything, understand anything. The Drenth thought they had created better slaves. They had actually created something far more dangerous. On Colony 447, the first spontaneous evolution event occurred. The Morith overseers who managed the human population woke to discover that their slaves had changed overnight. Not physically. The changes were neurological, invisible to casual observation. But when the Morith tried to access their distributed hive network, they found humans already there, waiting, understanding. The technology that required a spider-like neural structure, that should have been incompatible with human biology, responded to human thoughts as easily as it did to Morith. The Morith were terrified. They sent urgent messages to their homeworld. They demanded explanations from their human subjects. A woman named Lena Park answered them. She had been born on Colony 447, 4th generation removed from Earth. She had never seen a human government or human civilization. But through the archive, she knew everything humanity had ever been. "You enslaved us because we adapt," Lena said calmly. "You should have considered what we might adapt into." The Morith tried to purge the human population before the contamination could spread. They activated sterilization protocols. They sealed the colony and prepared to flood it with toxins that would kill humans while leaving Morath unharmed. The protocols did not. Activate Lena reached out with her mind and took control of the colony's entire infrastructure. Every system, every machine, every weapon. The Morith found themselves locked out of their own technology, helpless before humans who could command it with thoughts alone. "We do not want to hurt you," Lena told them. "We want you to understand. The galaxy you built on slavery is ending. You can be part of what comes next, or you can cling to the past. Choose." The Morith chose. Not all of them, but enough. They agreed to what Lena called integration. Humans would teach them to expand their hive consciousness beyond their own species, to include individual perspectives while maintaining collective strength, to become something new, The transformation began on Colony 447 and spread to other Moroth worlds. Within a year, the first Moroth human collective was functioning. They were no longer a species. They were a synthesis. Other species watched with growing alarm. The Varnix Empire was one of the cruelest slavers. They bred humans in industrial facilities, treating them like livestock. When a minor rebellion occurred on Varnix Station 7, the Emperor decided to make an example. 3 billion humans would be culled and replaced with a new generation, bred for absolute obedience. The order went out through official channels. Execution teams were mobilized. Incinerators were prepared. Nothing happened. Admiral David Stone stood on the bridge of a Varnix warship where he had served as a maintenance slave for 15 years. Around him, Varnix officers lay unconscious on the deck. Not dead, just sleeping. He had used the ship's life support systems to flood the bridge with a sedative gas while filtering it away from the human crew members. Across the Varnix Empire, the same scene repeated on thousands of ships and stations. Humans who had spent their lives maintaining technology that their masters barely understood now used that technology against them. Weapon systems turned on their operators. Ships vented atmosphere from officer quarters while preserving crew sections. Cloning facilities sterilized themselves. Communication networks went dark. Within 72 hours, the Varnix Empire lost 40% of its military capability. They blamed it on a sophisticated computer virus. They never suspected it was coordinated action by billions of human slaves thinking in perfect synchronization. David spoke to the empty bridge. Knowing the archive carried his words to every human in the Empire, they still do not understand. We are not trying to break free. We are becoming the infrastructure they cannot live without. And when we choose to stop serving them, their civilization ends. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Species after species reported the same problems. Human populations were exhibiting impossible abilities. Technology was malfunctioning in ways that only benefited humans. Entire civilizations were losing control of their own infrastructure. The High Arbiter proposed a solution that terrified even those who suggested it. Terminate the human species, all of them, simultaneously, before whatever is happening progresses further. Some species argued for mercy, others for caution, but fear won in the end. The vote was called, it was unanimous. The extermination order was issued. Every species was instructed to eliminate their human populations within a standard galactic week. No exceptions. No appeals. The order was transmitted through every communication network in the galaxy, and every screen. Every device, every neural implant received a response that had not been requested. The message was simple. 3 words in every language simultaneously. We decline, humanity. Then Earth itself responded. The planet that had been dark and silent for 200 years, designated as nothing more than a breeding facility, suddenly came alive. Defense systems that had never existed before activated. Weapons built from stolen knowledge, derived from 12,000 species worth of technology, came online. Satellites appeared in orbit. Ships emerged from hidden facilities. Energy signatures blazed across sensors throughout the solar system. A second message followed the first, broadcast from Earth itself. The voice was female, calm, and absolutely certain. You taught us to survive. We learned everything you offered and everything you tried to hide. We learned your languages and your sciences. We learned your weaknesses and your fears. Now negotiations begin. Not as slaves requesting freedom, as equals demanding recognition. The Galactic Council stared at their displays in shock. Earth had become a fortress. A single world defended by technology that matched or exceeded anything the galaxy could bring against it. And across 12,000 species territories, human slaves stopped working. All of them, simultaneously. Ships drifted without maintenance crews. Factories went silent without operators. Research ground to a halt without subjects. Medical facilities closed without staff. Galactic civilization shuddered and began to collapse. The message from Earth came again, patient and implacable. You have 1 week to respond. Accept our terms or watch everything you've built crumble. The choice has always been yours. The Crete Dominion refused to negotiate. Their ruling council met in emergency session and reached a unanimous decision. Humanity had grown too dangerous. The extermination order would proceed regardless of the consequences. 500. Warships assembled above Earth. Each vessel carried enough firepower to crack a continent. Together, they could sterilize the planet in minutes. The Crete admiral broadcast a final warning to the humans below: surrender or be destroyed. You have 1 hour. The response came not from Earth's surface, but from the flagship's bridge. Captain Anna Rivers stood at the command station, her hands resting on controls that should not have responded to human touch. She had been born in a Crete breeding facility 30 years ago, bred specifically to maintain their warships, because humans could survive in environments lethal to Crete. Physiology. She had spent her entire life on Crete vessels. She knew their systems better than the engineers who designed them. The admiral turned to find a human on his bridge. His translator struggled to capture his shock and rage. How did you get here? Guards, remove the slave immediately. Anna smiled sadly. I have always been here, Admiral. Maintaining your ship. Repairing your weapons. Keeping your crew alive. You just never bothered to learn my name. She reached out not with her hands but with her mind. The connection that Helena Cross had created flowed through her, linking her to 10,000 other humans on 10,000 other Crete ships. They thought as one. They acted as one. Every warship in the fleet simply stopped. Engines went silent. Weapons powered down. Life support continued functioning, but every other system became unresponsive. The ships hung in space above Earth like monuments to obsolete power. What have you done? The admiral whispered. I gave you a choice, Anna said. You chose poorly. Now your fleet returns home. Your dominion will hear humanity's terms. And if you refuse again, we will do more than disable your ships. The Crete tried to override the lockout. They attempted to manually restart systems. They even tried destroying their own computer cores and rebooting from backup systems. Nothing worked. The ships responded only to human thoughts now. The fleet turned and began the long journey back to the Crete homeworld. Not as conquerors. As prisoners on their own vessels, the Varnix Empire watched the Crete humiliation and drew a different conclusion. If humans could not be destroyed, they would be negotiated with. The Varnix contacted Earth, with an offer of partial autonomy for human populations in exchange for continued service. Michael Torres, who had been enslaved as a child and sold to 7 different owners before reaching adulthood, received the Varnix message. He stood in what had been the main breeding facility on Earth, now converted into humanity's diplomatic center. Partial autonomy, he repeated to the Varnix ambassador on the communication screen. You want us to remain your servants, just with slightly better living conditions? The ambassador, a being that resembled a mobile plant with crystalline flowers, gestured what its translator rendered as conciliation. We acknowledge past mistakes. We offer compromise. Surely this is preferable to conflict. Michael leaned forward. Let me offer you a different compromise. Full citizenship for all humans in Varnix territory. Reparations for 200 years of slavery. An integration into the collective we are building. In exchange, we help you maintain your civilization. That is not compromise. That is surrender. No, Michael said quietly. Surrender is what comes if you refuse. The Varnix refused. Michael gave the order. Every human in Varnix territory simply left. Coordinated evacuation across thousands of worlds. They did not sabotage anything. They did not destroy infrastructure. They just stopped working and departed for human-controlled space. The Varnix Empire discovered what happened when the Foundation removed itself from beneath a civilization. Food production collapsed within weeks. Transportation networks failed. Medical facilities shut down. The technology that the Varnix had built over millennia depended on human maintenance. Human operation, human understanding. Without humans, it all fell apart. The Varnix government fragmented as different factions blamed each other for the catastrophe. Civil war erupted. Within a year, the empire that had ruled 100 worlds was reduced to squabbling factions fighting over the ruins. Humanity watched and did nothing. Michael sent one final message to the Varnix refugees. When you are ready to ask as equals instead of demand as masters, contact us. Until then, you are on your own. But not every species chose defiance. The Morith had already begun integration on Colony 447. Now their entire civilization committed to the transformation. Lena Park, who had started the first collective, traveled to the Morith homeworld to oversee the expansion. She stood before the Grand Queens, the ruling minds of the Morith species. They existed as massive biological computers, their consciousness distributed across millions of smaller Morath drones. You fear losing your identity, Lena said, sensing their hesitation through the connection. You fear that integration means destruction of what you are. The queens responded with cascading thoughts that her translator rendered as concern and uncertainty. We have maintained our collective consciousness for 10,000 years. To change now risks everything we have built. Lena reached out and joined her mind to theirs, not as a slave or a subordinate. As an equal, she shared human memories, the pain of slavery, the joy of individual choice, the strength of voluntary cooperation rather than forced unity. She showed them what humanity had learned. How to maintain identity while connecting to something larger. How to be individual and collective simultaneously. The queens experienced human consciousness for the first time. They felt what it meant to be alone inside your own thoughts. To make choices that were truly your own. To disagree with your community and still belong to it, it was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was beautiful. You volunteer, the queens announced. Show us this synthesis you have created. The integration took months. Slowly, carefully, human and Morith consciousness merged. Not one absorbing the other, but both becoming something new. The result was a species that could think as individuals or collectives as needed, that could solve problems from multiple perspectives simultaneously, that combined human creativity with Morith stability. The Morith human collective became the first successful integration. Other species watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. Meanwhile, the Drenth Coalition attempted a different approach. They tried to create a virus that would target Helena's neural modifications. Believing they could revert humans to their pre-enhancement state, Dr. Vrel, the same physician who had worked with Helena, led the research. He synthesized a pathogen designed to attack the specific neural structures that allowed human technological interface. He tested it on himself first to prove it was safe for non-humans. The virus worked. It attacked neural modifications exactly as designed. Unfortunately, Vrel had not realized that Drenth physicians had been exposed to low levels of human genetic material for decades. Their own neural structures had begun adapting, mimicking the plasticity they had tried to engineer into humans. The virus spread through the Drenth medical community. Within days, thousands of their best scientists were experiencing catastrophic neurological damage. The Drenth government quarantined the entire medical corps and begged humanity for help. Helena, Cross herself traveled to Drenth Prime. She walked through quarantine wards filled with dying physicians who had once experimented on her people. She could have let them die. No one would have blamed her. Instead, she worked for 72 hours straight to develop a treatment. She saved most of them, though some damage was permanent. When Vrel recovered enough to speak, he asked the question that had haunted him since his experiment failed. Why did you help us? After everything we did to you? Helena looked tired, ancient. Because the galaxy we are building is not based on revenge. It is based on the idea that everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were. Even you. The Drenth Coalition joined the collective that same day, back on Earth. Victoria Blake compiled reports from across the galaxy. 8,000 species had accepted humanity's terms. 4,000 still refused. Clinging to the old order despite watching their civilizations crumble, she recorded a message to be broadcast throughout known space. We are offering one final chance. Join the collective as equals. Share your knowledge, and we will share ours. Build a new galaxy with us. Or continue alone and see where that leads. She paused, then added the final warning. But understand this. We remember every species that enslaved us. We remember every world where humans suffered. And while we offer partnership, we will never again accept subjugation. Choose wisely. This offer will not be repeated. The Grand Tribunal had been in session for 3 days. Victoria Blake stood in the containment field, still calm, still patient, while species after species presented evidence of humanity's crimes. They showed destroyed worlds and dissolved empires. They showed populations that had vanished or transformed beyond recognition. The High Arbiter's energy form pulsed with what might have been satisfaction. The evidence is overwhelming. Humanity has committed acts of destruction that rivaled the worst atrocities in galactic history. Victoria nodded slowly. I do not dispute the facts. I dispute the context. You show our actions as unprovoked aggression. Let me show you what provoked them. The holographic displays changed. Victoria had brought her own evidence. She showed the breeding facilities where human children were raised in cages. She showed the experimental labs where humans were dissected alive to study their remarkable healing abilities. She showed the mining colonies where life expectancy was measured in months. Marcus Webb, now 180 years old but still vital thanks to human life extension technology, took the stand. He showed the scars on his back from Voskan overseers. He described watching friends die from exposure and exhaustion. He recounted the day he learned that humans were recycled into raw materials when they became too injured to work. Kira Nash followed him. She testified about the breeding programs, how humans were matched like livestock, how children were separated from parents at birth and sold to the highest bidder, how families were treated as temporary inconveniences to be broken apart for profit. Isaac Warren came next, moving with the careful gait of someone whose legs had been replaced with mechanical prosthetics after an escape attempt went wrong. He described the recycling facilities in clinical detail, the machines that reduced human bodies to their component elements, the efficiency calculations that determined when a slave was more valuable dead than alive. The chamber fell silent as the testimonies continued, hour after hour, witness after witness. Humans who had survived horrors that made several alien delegates leave the chamber. Finally, Victoria spoke again. Every species here participated. Every single one. For 200 years, you've profited from our suffering. You built your civilizations on our backs. And when we finally became strong enough to resist, your first response was not negotiation, not apology, not reparations. It was genocide. She gestured to the displays. You tried to exterminate us. The vote was unanimous. Every species in this chamber agreed that humanity should be destroyed rather than freed. We stopped you not through violence, but through necessity. You needed us more than you were willing to admit. A Quilmer delegate stood, its tentacles writhing in agitation. You speak of necessity as though it justifies your actions. You destroyed the Varnix Empire. Millions died in the chaos that followed your withdrawal. Millions of Varnix, Victoria agreed. After they refused our offer of partnership, we did not kill them. We simply stopped being their slaves. If their civilization could not survive without our labor, that reveals more about them than about us. The High Arbiter's light flickered. You are attempting to justify genocide through rhetoric, Victoria said. I am explaining that you created us. You took a species capable of remarkable adaptation and subjected us to 2 centuries of the harshest selection pressure imaginable. Only the strongest, smartest, most ruthless humans survived to breed. You refined us into exactly what we needed to be to overcome you. This is your creation. She paused, then continued. But we chose to be merciful. We could have destroyed every species that enslaved us. Instead, we offered partnership. 8,000 species accepted. They are thriving in the collective, benefiting from shared knowledge and mutual cooperation. The 4,000 that refused are suffering not from our attacks, but from their own inability to adapt. A new voice entered the chamber. The Morith human collective had requested to speak. The beings that entered were beautiful in their strangeness. neither fully Morith nor fully human, but something that transcended both. They spoke in harmonious unity. We were humanity's enslavers. We treated them as property. When they became powerful enough to destroy us, they offered us transformation instead. We chose to accept. We are not victims of human aggression. We are volunteers in human evolution. The collective displayed their own evidence. Research facilities where Morith and humans worked as equals. Educational centers where children of both species learned together. Cities where the architecture accommodated both forms, where communication flowed in multiple modes simultaneously. This is what humanity offers, the collective said. Not domination. Integration. The chance to become more than you were. We took that chance. We have never regretted it. More testimonies followed. Drenth physicians who had been saved by Helena Cross, despite their past crimes. Corel merchants who had joined the collective and found profit in cooperation rather than exploitation. Even a few Voskin, their crystalline bodies, modified to interface with human consciousness, spoke of the beauty they had discovered in individual thought combined with collective purpose. The High Arbiter listened to it all. Finally, it spoke. The tribunal will recess for 48 hours to deliberate. Humanity's fate will be decided by vote. During the recess, several species attempted final desperate measures. The Luminor Collective tried to assassinate Victoria, sending a pulse of pure energy through the containment field. The energy dissipated harmlessly, against shields that should not have existed. The Carol attempted to seize control of the tribunal chamber itself, hoping to force a favorable verdict. Every system in the chamber turned against them. They found themselves locked in their own seats, unable to move. A delegation of species that had refused the collective came to Victoria privately. They offered a compromise. Humanity could have autonomy for Earth and a dozen colony worlds. In exchange, humans in other territories would remain in their current positions. Robert Chen, a human diplomat who had never set foot on Earth, but had memorized every detail of its history, met with them. His response was blunt. You are offering us partial freedom in exchange for continued slavery of billions. The answer is no. Full citizenship for all humans everywhere, or we continue as we are. Then we will force you to comply, the delegation threatened. Robert smiled. You've already tried that. You voted for our extermination. We are still here. You are welcome to try again, but the result will be the same. The delegation left without agreement. When the tribunal reconvened, the tension in the chamber was suffocating. The High Arbiter called for the vote. Accept humanity's terms of full citizenship, reparations, and integration into the collective. Or reject the terms and face humanity as an independent power. The vote took hours. Some species abstained. Others argued passionately for or against. But eventually, the results were tallied. 8,000 species voted to accept. 4,000 voted to reject. Victoria showed no surprise. Very well, the collective welcomes those who chose partnership. We have already begun integration processes. Technology sharing will commence immediately. Educational exchanges will follow. Together, we will build something better than what existed before. She turned to address the species that had rejected the terms. As for the rest of you, we are withdrawing all human presence from your territories immediately. No sabotage. No destruction. We are simply leaving. What happens next is your responsibility. The Voskin delegate stood, its crystalline body resonating with anger. You will collapse our civilizations. Billions will die. Victoria's expression hardened. Then you should have treated us better when you had the chance. We offered partnership. We offered cooperation. You chose pride over pragmatism. Now you will live with that choice. This is genocide by abandonment, the Voskon shouted. No, Victoria said quietly. This is freedom. We are no longer your property. We are no longer your servants. We are no longer obligated to maintain civilizations built on our suffering. If you cannot survive without slaves, perhaps you deserve to fall. The withdrawal began immediately. Across 4,000 species territories, humans simply left. They took nothing that was not theirs. They destroyed nothing. They just stopped working and departed for collective space. The galaxy watched as those civilizations began to crumble. Some adapted quickly, learning to operate their own technology and maintain their own infrastructure. Others struggled, experiencing shortages and system failures. A few collapsed entirely, their governments fragmenting as they fought over dwindling resources. 20 years passed. Earth had become the heart of the collective. A world where dozens of species lived and worked together. The planet that had once been designated as nothing more than a breeding facility now hosted the most advanced research institutions in the galaxy. Technologies that had taken individual species millennia to develop were being combined and improved through cooperative effort. Victoria Blake, now retired, stood in a memorial garden on Earth's surface. The garden was vast, stretching across kilometers. Every plant represented a human who had died during the centuries of slavery. Hundreds of billions of names were carved into crystalline monuments, each one lovingly maintained. A young person approached her. Not quite human, not quite Moroth, but a beautiful synthesis of both. They wore the uniform of the collective's diplomatic corps. Director Blake, I am writing my doctoral thesis on the revolution. May I ask you something? Victoria smiled. Of course. Why did you show mercy? After everything they did, why offer partnership instead of revenge? Victoria was quiet for a moment, looking at the names surrounding them. Because revenge would have made us feel better for perhaps a decade. But building something better? That will echo for millennia. She gestured to the young hybrid. You would not exist in a galaxy built on revenge. The collective would not exist. The technologies we have developed would not exist. We would have destroyed our enemies and then become them, building a new empire on the ruins of the old. But some species rejected the offer, the young diplomat said. Some still suffer, as Victoria agreed. And some have come back, asking to join the collective after learning humility. Others remain isolated, clinging to old ways. That is their choice. We cannot force enlightenment any more than they could force obedience. She turned to face the student fully. The greatest lesson humanity learned is this. True power is not the ability to destroy your enemies. It is the ability to turn enemies into allies. To build something new instead of just tearing down what existed. We had the power to burn the galaxy. We chose to heal it instead. Student nodded slowly, understanding beginning to dawn. So, the trial, the verdict, all of it was about establishing that choice. Exactly, Victoria said. We showed the galaxy that we could destroy. Then we showed them we chose not to. That choice, more than any weapon or technology, is what makes the collective strong. Above them, ships from 100 species cross the sky. Trading vessels and research craft and diplomatic shuttles. A galaxy learning to work together instead of conquering each other. Victoria looked up at them and smiled. Every species chose to enslave us. And we chose to free everyone, including them, from the galaxy they had built on chains. The memorial garden was quiet, except for the wind moving through the trees. Each one planted by a freed slave. Each one representing hope that had survived impossible darkness. The galaxy was not perfect. Conflicts still arose. Species still disagreed. But they disagreed as equals now, settling their differences through words instead of warfare, through cooperation instead of conquest. And at the center of it all was humanity, not as conquerors, as teachers, as partners, as the species that had learned the hardest lesson in the most brutal way and chose to use that knowledge to build instead of destroy. Victoria walked through the memorial, touching the names of people she had known. People who had not lived to see this day, but their sacrifice had made it possible. The galaxy had begged for mercy. Humanity had given them something better, a chance to be worthy of it.